Hello everyone, today I'm here to talk about the Sultai Reanimator deck, Kuruga Companion, that I have been playing lately and been trying to grind my way up to Mythic with. It's a very fun deck. It's definitely one of my favorite strategies. Ever since Drakuseth, aka Dr. Dergen, has been printed, I have been wanting to play him and make him like the most powerful thing that he possibly can be, and I love it. Like just being able to swing for 7 and deal another 10 damage across the board however you need to is absolutely phenomenal. So the whole deck is about getting Drakuseth, Titanothrax, or Agent of Treachery into the graveyard and then reanimating it with Bond of Revival. The cool thing about stuff from Ikoria is we also get things like a Luna that you can mutate onto some of your other creatures and then also just get these things for free. Titanothrax was a huge help from Ikoria because it's essentially a Ghalta that you can cycle. So you already have a way to get it into the graveyard for Bond of Revival. It helps smooth out your draws a little bit. And when you cycle, you can do things like give Drakuseth Trample or give Tomebound Lich Trample because it actually has text when you cycle it that you get to put a trample counter on something. And a lot of times I forget about that, but it has come up. Um, with Karuga as our companion, we obviously can only play things with converted mana cost 3 or greater. So we have our Tomebound Liches that help us loot, and a Death Touch Lifelinker on a 1/3 body is actually pretty relevant against aggro. We have Timuret Calls the Dead that you both chapter 1 and 2 mill 3 cards of your library, and then you can exile a creature or enchantment card from the graveyard to create a 2/2 zombie. And then the third one is you gain X life and Scry X. The gain X and Scry X doesn't come up too often, but it can be relevant, especially, Tomebound Lich is also a zombie, so a little bit of life gain, a little bit of fixing the draws can help. Um, then we have Discovery Dispersal, which its total converted mana cost is 7. So it does still get around the Karuga requirements, but its 2 drop is Surveil 2 draw a card. So it helps you ditch things into the graveyard that you might not necessarily want in your hand, or put stuff like Drakuseth in Agent of Treachery into the graveyard. And then we also have Timio, Collector of Tales. Um, this has been a staple quite a few times, and in this type of deck, it almost has to be there. There are different ways you can do stuff like this, but Tamio I think is just the best one. Her plus is choose an on-land card name, mill the top 4 cards of your library. Any cards with those names go into your hand, but everything else just stays in the graveyard. So more often than not, you play this, you plus naming Bond of Revival, you hope to mill your Drakuseth, your Titanothrax, your Agent of Treachery, whatever, whatever you're looking to bring back, hit your Bond of Revival, and then there you go. Now you have it played, and you have it set up for next turn. And that helps you get your turn 5 Bond to essentially win the game. Most of the time, if you can get Drakuseth or Titanothrax on turn 5, depending on the deck, you're probably going to win the game there. Um, Also, Tamio stops any sacrifice or discard, and that helps out a lot. There's been a lot of sacrifice decks, obviously, with Luris and Priest of Forgotten Gods running around, and that can actually hurt us quite a bit. So Tamio helps with protection for that. Timuret Calls the Dead also helps protect from Priest of the Forgotten Gods, since it does create 2/2 zombies. And like stuff like Euro, after the first one, you don't really need a bunch in the graveyard. So I usually just exile the second through fourth copies with Timuret Calls the Dead. Just more often than not, that 1 euro will come back and can keep coming back. So you don't really have to rely on having multiple in the graveyard. Timuret Calls the Dead can also just exile other vert copies of Timuret Calls the Dead, and that's a pretty cool little synergy there that can still just help us create the 2/2s, which is actually really important because having things to mutate a Luna onto does help us get our free agents or Drakuseths or what have you. I mean, there's no permanent that we play that we don't want on the battlefield. Like everything helps our game plan. Everything is pretty good for us to have. So, getting free agents is awesome, of course. Getting free Drakaseth, Titan Rexes, what have you. And, this deck is a ton of fun. I love these Reanimator style strategies. Since we are playing Karuga and we're not really doing anything in the early turns, we do get to play a lot of temples. And that's good because we need to make sure that, we see the cards that we want to see and we see lands and we're on curve all time, every time. So the temples really help out with that. The triomes are actually also pretty helpful in there. I have the catcher triomes in there just for the off chance that we actually have to hard cast a Drakeseth. It is technically possible without hurting our mana base too much since it still taps for two of the three colors that we use. So it's a blast. Its best matchups are the slow grindy decks like Yorion. Fires is usually pretty good. Sultai mid range has been out there. Bant mid range, whatever, what have you. The only really matchups that I don't want to see are the super aggressive red matchups and sometimes control, but most of the time I'm pretty good against control. This deck has a lot of just doing the same thing over and over until they don't have an answer. And then once they don't have an answer, you swing the game pretty hard, pretty fast. I mean, Drakaseth swings for 7 and deals an extra 10 damage across the board. Titan Rex is just a hasty Galta. Agent of Treachery steals their best thing. You know, even Tomebound Lich having Death Touch, if you mutate Aluna onto Tomebound Lich, well, now he's a 6/6 flying Death Touch lifelink trample. That loots. Seems pretty good. Sideboard, these Murder Striders are actually questing beasts now. So I forgot to change that. But yeah, these changed into questing beast to help out with the control matchup. So questing beast and mystical dispute both come in for any control matchup really. A lot of the Urian decks are pretty soft to stuff like questing beast, or it makes it to where they have to use their removal on stuff like that, and then you can start doing your Bond of Revival plan. So then we have Cry of the Canarium for the sacrifice decks and mono red for the most part. I don't always bring in all three for mono red because sometimes their stuff can get too big, but really it's just like Steamkin and Annex that get too big for it. So I do still bring in a couple of those. And we also have Thrashing Brontodon and two Casualties of War. Those are to get rid of Grafdigger's Cage, since people are definitely running a bunch of those, and it is something that this deck can fold to fairly easy. So the Questing Beast also helps with that, because if we know they're going to bring in cages and stuff, we do bring in some Brontodons, but I usually board out of the Bond of Revival plan for the most part. I just take out the Drakaseths, take out most of the bonds, and then just put in Questing Beast and Brontodon and kind of switch into a beat down deck. We still get our free stuff off of Lunas. We still can hard cast our Agent of Treacheries, and we can just still discard the Rex and play Bond of Revival in the same turn if we need to and have the chance to. And then Casualties is just great against any mid-range deck right now. There's a lot of that going around, and Casualties is just such a great card. Most of the time, it's at least a 3-for-1, and that makes it feel pretty good. So that is this version here. There's a lot of rares, a lot of mythics. It's fairly expensive. I only have, what is it, 5? Yeah, I only have 5 basics total in the whole deck. Everything else is pretty wild card heavy except for, Tomebound Lich and Discovery Dispersal. But, and I guess Bond of Revival is also an uncommon. But, it's a lot of fun to play, and if you have the stuff available, I would definitely give it a try. It can grind out a lot of decks while still being a ton of fun. And then yesterday, one of my viewers brought up, why not do a budget version? So the budget version, it takes 2 of the colors away. There's no Drakaseth, there's no Tomebound Lich or anything like that. The whole game plan with this one is to throw a bunch of stuff into the graveyard with, Gorging Vulture, Binding of Titans, Mire Triton, Glowspore Shaman, even the Venomous Hierophant, stuff like that. Get all that, get a bunch of stuff into the graveyard, and then you can still reanimate your Titanothrax, but ideally you want to get back Lotless Giant, which deals damage to target opponent for each creature in your graveyard. So you're milling a bunch of stuff over, you're putting a ton of creatures in the graveyard, and then you can almost just one-shot them. Doing it this way also allows us to run Blood for Bones because you're not really looking for the attack trigger. It's more about the end of the battlefield triggers. So, an early Blood for Bones, when you have, I mean, say like a Mire Triton and a Lawless Giant in the graveyard, you can sacrifice your Mire Triton, bring back Lawless Giant, put the Mire Triton back in your hand, start the whole thing over again. And there's actually a decent amount of Death Touch, which can help stave off, decks that definitely do get bigger and can go over the top of you pretty fast. Binding of the Titans actually can help against the sacrifice decks. I only played a few games with this deck, but it seemed like it could actually hold its own against most decks as long as they aren't doing anything too crazy. And then, Gorging Vulture and Mire Triton both help gain some life against the aggressive decks. So this is definitely a budget route that you can go. The Golgari Raiders I have in there just as an extra way to have a large attacker. And you can always, play this late game with maybe 10 or 11 creatures in your graveyard and then cycle the T-Rex to give it hate or to give it trample, which is actually pretty good. So this is more just about grindy, outvaluing the opponent. But one thing to note, as you can see here, it's only $10 to build in paper because there are 0 rares. This could actually have been played during the artisan event that just happened, but yeah, there's absolutely 0 rares in here. So I mean, it's somewhere you could start and just build up and work your way up to the Karuga Reanimator as you get there. But yeah, that is going to be the thing for today. I definitely appreciate everybody that has come and subscribed here lately and given me some support on my stream as well. If you haven't gone and followed the stream, please go do so at Gingerbeardman Gamer on Twitch TV. I'm at 94 followers now, so if I can get to 100, I would be absolutely ecstatic about that. Like, that is just something that I never thought would happen, and we're almost there. I also have a sub goal going on right now. We have 9 of the 15 needed to get to our next emote slot. I'm working on emotes here soon. Hopefully, I'll have some of those going on here shortly. And then if you haven't checked out my streams, I stream on Wednesdays and now Saturdays for the time being while, the pandemic and craziness is going on. Wednesdays is generally between 5 and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I go until about 9. And then on Saturdays, I generally stream in the mornings around 10 to 11 a.m. and go most of the day. So if you want to check any of that out, feel free to do so. If you haven't liked or subscribed this video, please do so. It definitely helps me out there. And I will see you guys next time.